Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Line-Miller, your host. Have you ever thought about how irrigation works? And you see those big systems that are out there just watering the entire field, and you think, wow, that's a big waste of water. Well, we have a man that's going to tell us all about how we can do better in that area. We have Mike Hemman. He is the president of North America with NetFM, and that is the precision agriculture arm of Orbia. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you, Pam. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. And I'm happy for you to start sharing with our audience a little bit about your expertise and specifically what your company does, because NetFM is very focused on what their project is, what their mission is.
Yeah, if I start at our company level corporately, we are basically focused on sustainability, and we believe that we can't do things the way that we have always done things and have a sustainable future. So Orbia as a whole is focused really in three different sectors, and they have a tagline, which is advancing life around the world. So we're focused on decarbonization. We're focused on water stewardship, which is where NetFM, the precision agriculture business, comes in, and then also focused on bringing broadband and better communications throughout the country, throughout the world. And specifically within our precision agriculture business, you mentioned irrigation as we started. We're largely focused on water conservation through precision agriculture.
Yeah. Well, and that's quite a triad of missions that you laid out there for Orbia, and that's very exciting to have a company that has that triad going on. I mean, great missions going together. Well, talk to us about the sustainability piece of what you do, because I think that's a huge benefit of your precision watering, precision agriculture.
Yeah, I think sustainability, it's a buzzword, of course. It's a good buzzword. And it's great that we've had more focus in the recent decade for sure. And really, especially since COVID, as people have really wanted to understand, where does my food come from? How was my food grown? We have a lot more interest in general in our food. And if you think about agriculture and you think about the future of agriculture, agriculture will not exist without sustainability being a core part of how ag operates. So a few statistics, I call them the feeding the world statistics. By 2050, we know that we're going to have to produce globally 70% more food just because of population growth.
Well, that is quite a triad that you have there as far as Orbia's mission. And really, we're going to talk today about NetFM and that precision irrigation piece of it, because water is a big issue right now, and conservation and using it well. And so how does NetFM approach that?
Yeah, I think you've hit on a very important factor. We have finite resources in this world. Water is certainly one of them, and it's something that's absolutely critical to agriculture. So from a NetFM perspective, we are all about how do we make the most use of the limited amount of water that we do have available. And from an agriculture standpoint, a big challenge that we have is how we're going to feed the growing population. So if you look at statistics would tell us that by 2050, we're going to need to produce 70% more food than we produce today to feed the population of what the growth will look like as we get to 2050. That means that we are also going to have to do that with less resources. Resources are finite, resources are shrinking. Land is one of them. We're going to have 20% less arable land to farm on, again, because of population dynamics. And we also know we're going to have less water. Probably about 25% less water available for agriculture. So now we got to produce more food on less land with less water. And oh, by the way, as consumers, we all want to do that in a sustainable fashion. So that's really where drip irrigation comes in and helps to achieve all of those goals.
Those are amazing statistics. I didn't realize the numbers were that large as far as the population, the food requirements, and how much our resources were going to decrease in that amount of time. That is amazing. Okay, well, let's talk about how you move into that with NetFM's approach.
Yeah, so typically people think about drip irrigation, I'll say primarily in high value crops. So, for instance, our headquarters for North America is here in California in the Central Valley. And as you drive up and down Highway 99, you are going to see orchards. You're going to see almonds, you're going to see grapes, you're going to see pistachios. And almost none of those anymore are flood irrigated. It's just inefficient and it uses way more water than what farmers currently have the ability to utilize. In California, especially because of the water challenges we have, we are overdrafting the aquifers, and so we're over pumping groundwater. So there are plenty of restrictions that are in place now to make sure that we are not overdrafting those aquifers. We have less surface water that we capture from the mountain snowpack to be able to use for irrigation as well. So farmers have a choice to make now. They either don't farm, they farm less acres, or they irrigate in a more efficient way. So the first place for us for sure is helping them to utilize the water that they do have in a more efficient manner so that they can continue to farm, keep farmers farming.
Yes.
Unfortunately, a lot of what we see in solutions that might come for reducing the amount of water that's utilized is we may pay farmers to fallow farmland. That may help to solve the water challenge that we have, but it doesn't help to keep farmers farming and to keep the amount of food grown that we need to produce that increasing population that we have to deal with. That's a primary part of where drip irrigation fits in.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big piece because like you said, keeping the farmers farming, we have to figure out how to better use the resources to keep, because the land is going to be decreasing anyway. We need to figure out how to keep farming that land and the best use of our resources, land and water. Wow.
Right. Now, the interesting thing though is if you think about what I said about the specialty crops. So we've been growing with drip irrigation and specialty crops for many, many, many years, for over 40 years in the United States. It's not an uncommon way of irrigation. But now think about the broader portfolio of crops that we grow in the US and globally, and think about crops like corn, crops like alfalfa, soybeans, cotton. There's a lot of other crops that are irrigated inefficiently, or in some cases, they're not irrigated at all. So one solution here is take an inefficient irrigation approach and switch it to something efficient like irrigation by drip irrigation. Another is you may say, I don't need drip irrigation, or I don't need irrigation at all, which may be true, but with irrigation, you can increase your yield. It's also a mechanism to be able to deliver fertilizer at the right time and the right place when the crop needs it. And all of these things allow farmers to grow more yield on the same or smaller footprint of land that they have. So again, going back to this fact that we got to produce more food to have food for more people, and we have less land to do it. Drip irrigation is a solution that will help you do that.
Yeah, and so you talked about, let's just define a couple terms here before we move any further forward, because you talked about, they're intuitive, but the flood irrigation is basically you just equally put water everywhere over the entire area that where you have crops. And whereas drip irrigation, how do you deliver that for our listeners who might not be familiar?
Yeah, great question. So what we do is we work with designers who will look at the specific farm footprint, the crop that's grown, and the spacing the crop is going to be grown on, all the things that you have to take into account on where you apply the water. And then they design a system, and either on the top of the ground or buried just beneath the ground, think about a tube. And this tube has different emitters in it at specific spacings that the water comes out of the tube through that emitter. So essentially, if you've got a plant, think about your home garden. If you were to plant tomatoes, you're not going to have tomatoes wall to wall on every single inch of the bed that you put the tomatoes on. You might have them spaced 4 inches apart, 6 inches apart. The system is designed so that the emitter is where the plant is. So the only place that you're delivering water is where there's a plant, where to your example before with flood irrigation, you're just running water down a ditch and everything is getting wet. So it's inefficient.
Yeah, I mean, and when you describe it that way, the inefficiency of how we used to irrigate is blatantly clear that there is a better way to do it, to irrigate. Well, what are some of the other benefits, as we move into, because I think about, all right, so now we've got a tube with the drip irrigation. What if we're finished with that field, or we're changing the crop, or, what happens then? Do we have to just throw that specially designed drip irrigation product away, or?
Yeah, so it really depends upon the crop that you grow. So in crops that are permanent in nature, such as an orchard, so a pistachio orchard, almond orchard, grapes, the system is designed to be in the field for the lifetime of the crop. So we have systems that are 20, 30-year old, and they are still operating. There are other areas, let's say on the other end, lettuce is a good example, where there's multiple crops per year. And in that case, the system is put in, and when the crop is done, the system is removed. The challenge that has happened in that particular instance with that particular crop is it's wasteful to do that. So now all of a sudden you have an end of life with this drip system. What do you do with it? How do you continue this focus on sustainability?
Yeah.
What NetFM has done is we pioneered a new system where we have a 360-degree circular economy model where every single aspect of the drip irrigation, from the manufacturing to the utilization to the end of life solution, is managed by NetFM. So the way that would work is the farmer plants the crop, utilizes our irrigation system, they grow the crop. When they're done and the irrigation system is removed, we actually send a truck. The truck comes over, picks up all the used drip line. We take that drip line back to a recycling facility that we have. We recycle that drip line. We recover the raw material from that drip line, and then we take that and remanufacture that raw material into a brand new product that we deliver back out to the same farm. So it's a true 360-degree model.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I would say unique in your industry, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I have not heard that before. And I think that's a definite competitive advantage. If I were a farmer, I'd be looking at your system first because of that the sustainability piece, that we're not just going to trash that resource material. But you've also had experience in food, but not in actual plants, in the dairy area with your systems. If you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a unique system that we've been operating for the last several years, and it's actually growing pretty quickly. We call it SDIE, and what it stands for is subsurface drip irrigation. So this is drip irrigation that's underground. It's slightly buried underground. And the E stands for effluent. So as anybody involved in the dairy industry knows, there is a lot of effluent or manure that is generated by cows. And it's something that has to be managed. In some cases, there's a lot of value in that manure because it does have nitrogen and it can be used in the field as a fertilizer, but it's difficult to deal with. It's challenging to operate in the way that people have traditionally operated. So what we have developed is a solution where all of the manure can be moved into a pond. And as it's moved into the pond, it runs through a series of different filtration screens, and it's removing the large solids. So ultimately, what you end up with is a solution that's very rich in nitrogen. And what we do then is we have a computer operated system that will blend the proportionate amount of that dairy manure that's in that particular water source with fresh water. And it's constantly calculating what the EC is and what the nutrient content is. Then that is pumped into drip irrigation underground and delivered to a crop. So a farmer might have a silage crop of corn or alfalfa. So a couple of things happen. One is you get rid of the waste source. The other thing that happens is now you're able to deliver this in a way that's sustainable, because otherwise what you might do is spread it on top of the ground. And if you spread it on top of the ground, you're going to get greenhouse gas emissions. You might also put too much on and get a heavy rain or a lot of water and end up leaching into the water table, and you end up with nitrates in groundwater. With drip irrigation, you can control exactly how much you put on, when you put it on, and the farmer now also has the ability to reduce or completely eliminate the need for synthetic nitrogen because they have fertilizer coming from the manure. So it's just been a great solution for dairy farmers.
Yeah, I would think as a dairy farmer, that's a win-win-win because the dealing with the manure or the EF as or EC as you were calling it. I love how you come up with very tactful names for the waste products from the cows. I think that's such a good marketing idea. But the fact that they can actually reuse that, do the perfect mix. I mean, you've got the water coming in and you're actually measuring what the field where they put the drip irrigation in, what it's going to receive. Talk about precision irrigation. That's like the ultimate right there. They can control that. And that seems like a great benefit. And again, that whole 360 idea, it's not recycling the actual product, but it's kind of recycling the waste product that before was a problem. To what do you do with that? I mean, all of us have been by farms where you see piles of manure, that the manure pile, and it's just sitting out there traditionally. So it's exciting to have a great viable solution for that that's actually being utilized in a really creative way. Well, how can farmers find out, because you're also very involved with farmers, obviously, you're working with them all of the time. And I know you've got some resources and some ideas to share with them about where they can go for information.
Yeah, so there's several aspects to this. I would say our sales team and our agronomy team, we have two different teams, are always available to meet and visit with a farmer, whether it's to help diagnose a challenge that they have on a current system, design a new system. You can find any of the information you need at netfmusa.com. But another key part of our work and what we do with farms, if I go back to what we had said earlier about expanding beyond just the permanent crops and the specialty crops, is moving into some of these, we call them broad acre crops, corn, soybeans, wheat, alfalfa, things of that nature, where we know there's a benefit in drip irrigation, but because it's not the same level of profitability to farm those type of crops, sometimes the hurdle for the capital expenditures that need to happen to design and install that drip irrigation is a challenge. One of the things that we have started to do is bring together a team where we focus on how do we help the farmer access funding resources that will help them offset the capital expenditures that are associated with the drip irrigation system. So on our website, we have a farmer hub. And at the Farmer Hub, it can tell you more information about specifically the crop that you're growing. And we will also be able to direct farmers towards state programs that might be available. For instance, in Arizona, there's a lot of focus right now on alfalfa and moving alfalfa to a more efficient irrigation method. There's a Arizona water conservation credit. So we can help farmers to understand how to access that. We can work with them to understand more about the University of Arizona's water irrigation efficiency program. Federally, there are programs like USDA's EQIP program, it's the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, and also a program called Conservation Stewardship Program. We can work with the farmers to help them figure out how they can provide the right information to the right organizations, USDA in this particular case, to receive cost share efficiency or cost share funding to help them install these more efficient irrigation systems.
Yeah, that's really great. And knowledge about what resources are available is so important because, they wouldn't necessarily know where to reach out or how to find out about that or take the time to do the research. They're busy farming.
Sure,
Which
absolutely.
Right. So that's very exciting. And you also, partnership with other corporate entities that are interested in these topics, right? And helping the
We do.
farmers.
Yeah, so if you think again, go all the way back to sustainability, and if we think about sustainability from a corporate standpoint, we understand that there are some industries that by nature, they have a big environmental footprint that means that they utilize a lot of water. And many of these companies do everything they can to limit the amount of water that they utilize, but they consume more water than what they're able to conserve. So we have many partnerships with these companies where they are seeking to actually invest in areas where they can help people conserve water because they want their total water footprint to be neutral or water positive. So in some of these cases, what we will do is we'll find a farmer in a specific hydrologic basin that's near where this particular entity might be. And there's corporate funding available that we can go to a farmer and say, we're going to give you money from this company. What they are asking you to do is change from flood irrigation to drip irrigation. And we want to measure how much water you're saving. And we can do that with a water meter. And all of that information can be read remotely. And we know exactly how much water has been saved. And that company then can come back and say, we are doing our part. We know that we have a large water footprint, but we're doing our part outside of our core business to save water.
Wow. So they can essentially partner up and enable a farmer to conserve water in a better way with precision irrigation. And then as a partnership, they can offset their usage with the savings. That's
absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And for the farmer, in many cases, again, if you think about, I'll use alfalfa as an example, it's not the same level of profitability to farm alfalfa as it might be to farm almonds or pistachios. So the capital payback for the irrigation system is a lot longer time. And in many cases, just on its own merits, the farmers don't want to wait that long to have that payback period. But if a company can come in and help them reduce that capital cost by 50%, 60%, 70%, now the payback period of the system is a lot shorter and it just makes more economical sense. So it's good for everybody.
Nice. That sounds like a great partnership idea to me. And you're also active at the legislative level. I mean, policies that go into, I mean, you want to help the farmers utilize your product, obviously, and also contribute to the sustainability piece at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say from the legislative level, there's a couple of ways that we look at this. One is there are programs like we just talked about. EQIP is a good example. Conservation stewardship is a good example. Those are programs that are already have been approved. Those are where there's already money that's been appropriated. And of course, we're helping farmers to access those resources where we can. But ideally, what we want to be is on the front end of any legislation that is passed. And we really seek to make sure that our policymakers understand the needs of the farmer. So we are several times a year on Capitol Hill. We are several times a year working with local officials as well to make sure that they understand the needs of the farmer. And a great example, I used it earlier, is many of these programs say, oh my gosh, we've got less water on the Colorado River. We should pay farmers to not farm so we don't have to use that water. We believe there's a better way. And we believe what we should do is work with those farmers. And instead of having the federal government or state government pay them not to farm, perhaps we can redirect those resources into a cost share for efficient irrigation, like drip irrigation, that allows us to meet the need that we have, which is conserving water, allows us to meet the needs that we have with population dynamics, which is grow more food on less land. It's a win-win for everybody, and it's a more efficient use of the tax dollars that we all pay on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And we want the most efficient use of our tax dollars.
We do.
Across the board. That's really important. Well, let's talk a little bit also about some certifications, because you talked a lot about sustainability, and I know you have some kind of certification that is offered, not through you, but through a unbiased third party, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that we really want to do is, for sure, in our DNA is sustainability. We know that the DNA is all, or in many of our farmers' DNA, they have that same want, need, desire for sustainability. But we also recognize that they're operating a business, and there's an economic factor to this as well. So in an ideal world, we produce products that are more sustainable. Farmers utilize those products to farm in a more sustainable way. And at the end, they are compensated for the additional work that they are doing, the additional cost in some cases that they put out to grow in a sustainable way. And we believe, and I think we've seen this during COVID as well, that there are consumers, I would count myself as one of them, that have given the choice to buy product A that was grown in a traditional way and product B that was grown in a more sustainable way. We know there are people who would actually pay a little bit more for a product that's grown in a sustainable way. So we have a certification program that we're working with produce growers where we have a third party that verifies the way in which the irrigation process is utilized, the way in which we're recycling the drip line at end of life, and they actually have a stamp that they can put on their product whenever they sell their product. And ideally, what happens is consumers begin to understand people are making choices to farm in a little bit more sustainable manner than they have in the past. And ideally, if we can get back to that consumer that's willing to pay a couple percent more for a product that's grown sustainably, that's going to put money in the farmer's pocket, and that's going to keep farmers farming.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, Mike, you certainly have shared so much with us about this whole area, which honestly I was unaware of before doing our interview. So I'm so glad to be exposed to that. I hope our listeners and viewers feel the same way. But what else would you like to leave with our audience before you go?
Yeah, the thing I would say is I always try and think about the farmer, and the farmer is the core person that we are all focused on. And there's a famous quote that the farmer is the only person in our economy who buys at the retail price, they sell at the wholesale price, and they pay the freight both ways. Our farmers are in a very challenging position right now, especially as we see this challenge that we have in our economy with inflation, rising input cost. We are all paying more in the grocery store, but it's not making its way back to the farmer. The farmer is paying more in input costs. The farmer is paying more in labor costs. The farmer has a higher interest rate on the loans that they have to take out to be able to farm. So I think we need to always keep the farmer in the middle of our mind, front and center. And I would say from a NetFM perspective, every day we wake up, that's the first person that's on our mind. When we use the word customer, to us, customer equals farmer. And everything we do is focused on innovating to help that farmer. I think all of us that are involved in ag should think about that. And those that may not be directly involved in ag, I think it's important to understand the challenge that we have there, and that we want to do everything we can to keep farmers farming in a sustainable way.
Yeah. And I think listening to you today, I mean, that's what we can do is try to pay attention to how we're operating, the things we're buying, and what we're supporting. Is there anything else you would have, like us normal people that aren't involved in ag? What can we do in this situation?
Support local farmers. I mean, there's a farm market probably in everybody's backyard somewhere. Think about sustainable farming anywhere that you can look and buy locally. If you think about produce, we import a lot of produce, but we also have a lot of local domestic farmers here that it's great to support them as well. So make good food choices. I think the other thing, vote with your pocketbook. And if you see that there's a item of produce or fruit or vegetable that costs a little bit more, but it's grown in a more sustainable way, that's going to make it back to the farmer. So vote with your pocketbook.
Yeah, great. Mike, thank you so much for giving of your time and expertise today to share on this topic. I know we appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience appreciates it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And to our audience, please let us know what you thought about this. Leave us a comment. We will answer any comments, questions, pass them on to Mike. Also, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Until then, I'm Pam Linemiller.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.